We thought we were investigating the ghost of a little girl. We were wrong. When the husband cried out and we lifted his shirt, we saw the 3 bloody scratches, carved deep into his skin by an invisible hand. My name is Mark. For years, I've been a paranormal investigator. I've always approached my work with a healthy dose of skepticism. My job isn't to find ghosts. It's to find the truth, which is usually faulty wiring, old plumbing, or an overactive imagination. In 1993, we got a call that would test my skepticism to its absolute limit. It was from a young couple, Tony and Debra Pickman, in Atchison, Kansas. They had just moved into a modest rental house and had a newborn baby. They sounded desperate. Their new home, they said, was haunted. When my team and I arrived, the house looked like any other on the street. It was an unassuming brick building with a history of being a doctor's office in the early 1900s. There was no grand Gothic menace to it. Tony and Debra told us their story. It began with little things, lights flickering, the dog barking at nothing. Then, the activity started to focus on their baby's nursery. Toys would turn on by themselves, often the ones that played music. A stuffed bear would repeatedly be found on the floor, far from where they had left it. At first, they weren't afraid. The local legend was that a little girl named Sallie had died in the house during a botched appendectomy on the doctor's operating table. The Pickmans assumed it was her spirit, a lonely child just wanting to play with their baby. They spoke to her, left toys out for her. They tried to make her feel welcome. Our job was to document these claims. We set up our equipment, electromagnetic field detectors, audio recorders, thermal cameras. I expected a quiet night of debunking, but the house had other plans. In the nursery, the EMF meters would spike wildly for no reason. We recorded hours of audio tape, and upon playback, we captured clear electronic voice phenomena, or EVPs. Faint, but unmistakable, was the sound of a child's giggle and a whispered word that sounded like, "mine." The temperature would drop 20 degrees in an instant in the corner of the room. It was compelling evidence, but I still searched for a logical cause. Old wiring, drafts, stray radio signals. There had to be an explanation. Then the haunting stopped being playful. It turned violent, and it directed all of its rage at one person, Tony. It began with small shoves from an unseen force. Then came the objects. We were all sitting in the living room one evening discussing the case when a heavy glass ashtray from a side table suddenly flew across the room and shattered against the wall, just inches from Tony's head. We all saw it. It didn't slide or fall. It was thrown with incredible force. Tony was terrified. He was a down-to-earth, working man, not prone to fantasy, but he was being physically targeted by something we couldn't see. The climax of the haunting, the moment that erased every last shred of my professional detachment, came during an investigation in the kitchen. We were trying to communicate with the entity, asking it to give us a sign. The air grew thick and cold. Tony, who was standing in the middle of the room, suddenly cried out, a sharp, guttural sound of pure pain. He stumbled back, clutching his chest, his face pale with shock. "It got me!" he gasped. "It burned me!" We immediately had him lift his shirt, and there on his chest were 3 long red welts already beating with blood. They were perfectly parallel, as if a 3-fingered claw had raked across his skin. We had all been watching him. No one was near him. Nothing had touched him. The scratches had appeared on his body, under his clothes, from absolutely nowhere. In that moment, the scientific investigation was over. We were no longer observers. We were witnesses to an assault by an invisible, malevolent force. This was not the ghost of a little girl. This was something else. Something pretending. After that night, the attacks on Tony became a regular occurrence. He would be burned and scratched repeatedly. We would set up a video camera, and you could see him flinch and cry out in pain, and then the marks would appear. We captured a recording of him asking, "What do you want from me?" and a clear EVP came back on the tape, a harsh, demonic-sounding whisper that said, "Your soul." The house became a battleground. Fires would spontaneously start in the nursery. Pictures of Tony and the baby would be found turned face down, with scratches across their images. The family's dream home had become a living hell. Debra and the baby were largely left alone, but Tony was relentlessly tormented. It was as if this entity saw him as a rival, a threat. We brought in psychics who claimed the entity was not a child, but a demonic force masquerading as one to gain the family's trust. We arranged for an exorcism, but even the priests were unnerved by the sheer intensity of the activity in the house. Eventually, the Pickmans could take no more. They fled the house, leaving nearly all of their possessions behind, desperate to escape the thing that was trying to destroy their family. The moment they left, the violent activity reportedly stopped for them. They were finally free. But the house at Atchison, the Sallie House, remains. It is considered one of the most active and malevolent hauntings in America. Other investigators and visitors have reported the same phenomena: the cold spots, the moving objects, and the terrifying, violent scratches. I have investigated hundreds of cases since then. I have seen many strange things, but I have never again witnessed anything like the raw physical violence that occurred in that house. I went to Kansas to find the truth behind a ghost story. What I found was a truth far more terrifying: that we are not always at the top of the food chain, and there are things in the shadows that hate us, that can reach out and leave their marks not just on our souls, but on our very skin. Not every spirit that seems like a child is innocent. Sometimes, the most terrible things hide behind the smallest masks, and the most dangerous ghosts are the ones you first invite in to play. They don't want a friend, they want a toy.